Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. My name is Naomi, the How To Chick, and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. If this is your first time catching one of my lives, my name is Naomi, the How To Chick. I am a child of God, a wife, a mom, an attorney, a coach, a mentor, and a speaker. And I believe that you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And it is so important to choose wisely. Tonight, I'm coming to you guys to talk about something that I hint and allude to frequently, but sometimes I wonder if we really understand what it means. And it's about learning how to be open and what it really means. I gave a quote that many of us know, and most of us, including myself, ascribe to Aristotle. It's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And as I thought about that, I thought about an interaction that I had this week, and I wanted to come on and talk to you guys a little bit about what it really means to be open minded and what the benefits of open mindedness are in our lives, how it can help us grow and develop, and how, most importantly, because you guys know this is my biggest thing, how it can help our relationships. Okay, so open mindedness is typically, when we think about it, we think about it as being tolerant of other people or not prejudiced or not biased. Psychologically, however, what it really means is how willing are you to be empathetic? That is, to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to really put on their circumstances and their perspectives, or to try out a new way of thinking or new experiences or ways of thinking that are uncommon to you or uncomfortable for you. It really involves being open to a wide range of ideas and possibilities, to different sides of an argument, and to information that challenges your worldview. Even though most of us would consider being open minded to be a good quality, most of us don't really understand what it means. And to the extent that we do, we typically limit our exposure, right, to those things that could potentially make us uncomfortable, to things that do not challenge our worldview. So, tonight, as you guys know, I love to talk about how concepts, how certain things that we can do can actually change the relationship that we have with ourselves and with other people, and most importantly, with God. You guys know I'm unapologetically a God girl. And so when we think about open mindedness, most of us do not fully recognize that we have to be willing to actively search for evidence that goes against the position that we want to take, the thing that we want to believe, the plans or goals that we have. And we have to weigh that evidence fairly, even with the things that are on the same side when it's available. Being open minded doesn't mean a person is wishy washy. It doesn't mean they're easily manipulated. It doesn't mean they're not capable of thinking for themselves. As a matter of fact, typically and scientifically, it means the opposite. It means eliminating the biases, and living in 2024, we all understand that those closed silos of information that many of us find ourselves in because it's comfortable. We don't want to be in, keyboard warrior arguments on the other side of a keyboard. We do not wish to see people promoting misinformation and, things that are offensive to us in some ways. So we tend to lean towards and believe information that comports with our worldview and comes from sources that we deem credible. And this can be very dangerous. And again, I'm unapologetically a God girl, and I've talked about this verse before, but it's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. It's in Micah chapter 6 and verse 8, and it says, "The Lord has shown you, O man, what it is that he desires of you. It is to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God." And I've examined that text again and again. And what it really leads me to an understanding of is that there's not a word wasted in the scriptures, right? There is not a word wasted. And when I think about that text in context, what it leads me to understand is there's not a single one of us that's righteous or worthy or infallible. And so there's not ever going to be a time where there is a human, a person, a government, an agency, an entity, a news source, right? That is completely infallible and is always on the right side. And so for me, what that means is I have to examine everything. I have to examine what I believe and why. I have to examine the sources, even the sources that I trust, to ensure that what I am receiving is factual and is, you know, we don't have the ability to have the complete truth. And I think most of us that lived through the 2020 news cycle know that there was so much misinformation coming from everywhere. Any site can just make themselves a news site .co or you know, biz and just write articles. And for many people, they got caught up in that cycle because they had an information bias that a certain person always is on the wrong side, or a certain person is always going to do the right thing, or a certain government or a certain country is always going to be in the right or in the wrong. And open mindedness doesn't let us stay there. Research actually suggests that there are some benefits to open mindedness that most of us don't even recognize. Open mindedness is one of the most important signs of intelligence. And so when we talk about that Aristotle quote, even though Aristotle was saying that we should be able to examine a thought, an idea, a belief system that challenges what we think to be true or believe to be true or believe we know to be true based on quote unquote facts that we have, that we should be able to examine it in all aspects of it without accepting it if when it's challenged, it's not true. Open-minded individuals are typically smarter. They typically perform better on cognitive IQ and intelligence tests. And they're usually better, and this is the part that's most relevant to us, they're better able to predict how others are going to behave, and they're not as prone to projection. So a lot of times we get in our feelings, and this is what we're kind of going to be talking about tonight. We get in our feelings about something that someone has done or said, and we believe something about them as a result, right? Because we have a belief system. We believe that something should be or is correct, whether it's for our children, whether it's on our job, whether it's with a sibling, a coworker, or a friend. We believe something is correct, and they come in and they challenge that. And instead of us taking the time to examine it, taking the time to ask questions, taking the time to get their perspective. And I always hate to include children in this, but I think for many of us who grew up under the I told you so generation of parenting, we are learning as part of gentle parenting to get to the root of the question. My dad was prone to calling anything that wasn't immediate obedience with a yes, sir rebellion. And I'm a little different than that. I do expect obedience, but I expect an obedience born of understanding, right? You may not agree with me, but you'll understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. And I'm going to understand what your position is in rebuttal. And I think that's important for me. Why? Because I consider myself to be open minded. So, open mindedness requires that we be able to consider all sides of a question. Open mindedness is not easy, right? But the difference between open and closed minded people isn't that great, especially when it comes to belief systems. And this is the hardest thing for anyone to be challenged on. Open minded people, because they're so open to new ideas and experiences, they come into contact with many people and they learn more. Because when you're willing to probe and ask questions, you're going to get a lot more backstory and a lot more understanding. It leads to greater depth of relationships. It leads to empathy. and it leads to an understanding that allows you to get, I don't want to say leverage, but you get credibility with someone when you can really listen to and they feel heard and understood. Closed minded people tend to be receptive only to the ideas that comport with their worldview. These are our silo people. They do not listen to anything that challenges that worldview. They have very rigid thinking and they do not ask questions. This is a key hallmark of a closed minded person. They don't ask questions. And they don't ask questions because why a person believes what they believe, why a person has done what they have done does not matter. All that matters is that they have done, said, thought, or believed something that challenges this person's worldview. And as a result, closed minded people are often most perceived to be insensitive towards others' feelings, and they are the ones who are most highly perceived as being incapable of authentic and empathetic relationships with others. So these are people who truly have stunted relationships. You find this a lot with people who come from childhood trauma, and many times they reperpetrate that trauma onto their children because they have not learned how to accept other ideas. Even people who consider themselves open minded have their, what do they call them? The hills that they're willing to die on. These are the topics that they take a firm stance on, the things that you're passionate about, the social issues, whether it's recycling, whether it's, having fewer children, whether it's universal health care, whether it's, gay marriage, whether it's whatever it is, right? Having convictions is fine, but strong belief systems do not have to negate an open mind. Being open-minded does not mean, again, back to our Aristotle quote, not Aristotle quote, Aristotle quote, being open-minded means being able and willing to do the work, to understand someone else's perspective, to hear them out, to truly consider the factors that have gone into their belief, their decision making, or their position, and to be empathetic to them, asking questions, right? Relating with them on areas in which you do agree instead of holding a line on something that is a belief system for them and a belief system for you, and being kind and respectful even when you disagree. Open mindedness has its limits, guys. I understand. It doesn't mean that you have to sympathize with every ideology. I mean, Nazism comes to mind. I can't imagine a situation where I would be able to have a comfortable conversation with someone who believed in Nazi ideology, but making an effort to understand the factors that actually goes into someone's decision making can be helpful in finding a common ground. And this is one of the only ways to persuade people to change their mind. People do not change their mind because your beliefs are different, because your facts are different, or because you can speak more loudly or more articulately than them. They do not. Persuasion comes through understanding. I actually was, oh goodness, I was studying in the scriptures, and Paul went and he worked in a place, and we don't know how long he was there, but I'm guessing it was a couple of years. He took up a business as a tent maker. And the scriptures say, and this was in Corinthians, in Corinth, he went and he worked and he went to church with the people every day and tried to reason with them about their belief system, right? That excluded Jesus being the Messiah. Paul understood that just because you know something and you've been convicted, just because the Lord appeared to you on the road to Damascus, doesn't mean someone else can accept your firsthand experience in the second hand and believe as you believe. And so he worked in persuasion. He said, I've become all things to all people. And what that means is not compromising who you are. It doesn't mean that you're going to let your child go out and get that tattoo at 14, or, go out and drop out of school and start that business at 16, or, whatever it is that they're asking to do. It means that you've listened to them. It means that you've understood where they're coming from, right? And you've tried to relate to them on their core values. And it means that you're not angry at the differences between the belief systems. You don't get angry, right, when you're seeking to build relationship. You have empathy for other people. And so one of the most important things is to understand that if you go into these conversations with the belief that others have a right to share their beliefs and thoughts, they have a right to believe differently than you do, and to they have a right to come to the conclusions they've come to based on their life, their experiences, and their understandings. When we get there, it breeds humility. Humility helps you to understand that your knowledge and expertise are not as important in many cases as someone else's lived experience. If we do not want to hear and genuinely display a desire and a care for others that shows them that we want to hear what they have to say, we're listening to understand. And we don't just want to understand what they're saying about this belief system. We want to understand them, their motivations, what they've been through, what hurt, right? What anger, what frustration is underlying a decision or a belief system. Empathy, right? When we get there, we're able to have our ideas challenged in a way that's helpful. Because if we were to look at many of our belief systems, we would find that they're not really underpinned by facts. They're underpinned by things that we have been taught, things that have been reinforced by our lived experience and our worldview, and things that we believe as a result of the life that we've lived. And if we could get to the place where we understand that everyone else is living their own life, has had their own experience, and their belief systems, decisions, thoughts, and ideologies are shaped by those, then we would be more effective communicators. We would be more effective bridge builders, and we would be more effective in our relationships. Okay, so people do not enjoy uncertainty. And this is why belief systems are so important. People like to be in camps. I lived in Arizona for 10 years, and Arizona is one of those weird states where if you are an independent, you're not allowed to vote in any party's primary. You have to register as either a Democrat or a Republican to vote in a primary. People want to force people to get into a camp. They want you to pick an ideology. They want you to fly a flag. They want you to be very firm. And there are too many people who have gotten firm on things they don't even understand because they're uncomfortable. And emotionally, psychologists have discovered that many of us are distressed, right? When we don't feel like we have an understanding of what's going on, and we have to say, I don't know, or we have to say, I'm not sure. We don't want to do that. We want to say yes, or we want to say no. We want to say left. We want to say right. We want to say red. We want to say blue. We do not want to live in ambiguity. And the thing is, that level of discomfort with the unknown, with the gray areas that really do exist, breeds dogmatism, which is, it's easier to understand, right? When you have to draw a line and pick one. But by rejecting alternative ideas that challenge the status quo, people limit their worldviews, even while they minimize their uncertainty and make themselves feel better. They limit their worldview and close off their ability to make the types of relationships that breed the most intelligent, the most resilient, and the most people-oriented people that exist. The benefits of being open-minded are that you actually learn things. Challenging your existing belief systems, considering new ideas can give you a fresh perspective. And remember what I said, psychologists have proven in studies that people who are more open-minded, and they do test for this, are people who are able to better predict what other people are thinking, what other people are feeling, and thereby what their actions and their responses are going to be. So by limiting our exposure to other people's ideas, other people's belief system, other people's facts, by never challenging our belief systems, we are left stumped and speechless when wild and crazy things go on in the world. And I'll tell you guys this: I'm a student of World War II, not a student of the major perpetrator, the father of Nazism, as it were. I'm not a student of his, but I've studied enough of him to know and understand the playbook. And so there were many people who were surprised by the election in 2016. I was not. And so having the ability to listen, to pay attention to consume things that do not align with our belief systems actually gives us valuable inputs to help us understand the world in which we live, because we don't live in the silos that we allow ourselves to create in our communities and on social media. The world is not that silo. America is not that silo. And many people who were shocked, appalled, crying in tears recognized that even their families were not those silos. So it's important to have new experiences. It's important to become strong enough mentally to accept challenges to our belief systems. And some of the benefits of this is you feel more optimistic. When you recognize that most of what people do, think, and believe has more to do with them than it does with you, you stop projecting. You get out of your head. It reduces neuroticism because it was never about us. And that's always something that I remind people. What other people do is usually not about you, usually. Now, sometimes it is, and I'm not in control of that. But the next thing is that you learn and you build relationships that can help you to continue learning. There is wisdom in a multitude of counselors. This is in Proverbs. And I know a lot of people who think I have to have mentors who are X, Y, and Z. Some of my favorite mentors have been people with whom I did not align in many ways, whether it was socioeconomically, whether it was religious, whether it was politically. They taught me things that I would never have learned because I didn't think as they thought, and I didn't have the life experiences that they had. So it is so important to recognize that intelligence, empathy, relationship building, understanding are shaped by being willing to consume things that we would not ordinarily consume. And I'm not talking about, television shows necessarily. I don't, I'm really I'm not talking about media. I'm talking about information, conversations, belief systems. What encourages open-mindedness is that it is the idea that you can start a conversation with someone based on something that you know about them that they know is not in your belief system. Ask a question. I'm a Christian and I have some of my best conversations with people who are not. And it's not because I'm trying to convert them, and it's not because I'm trying to challenge what they believe. It's because I genuinely want to know and understand why they believe what they believe, how they got there, and what it means to them. What are the underpinnings of it? How does it affect their lives? Because I know how what I believe affects my life. So people are more likely to be open-minded in one-on-one situations. So you're not going to find people willing to challenge status quos or state unpopular opinions in public places. So this is not something that you're going to be using to shame people by asking them questions about an email you read over their shoulder. People are more likely to be open to you and to these conversations when they're not under time pressure and you're not. So again, we're not talking about 20 questions in 5 minutes. We're not talking about barraging them with an attempt to confuse them and then pushing what we believe on them. What we're really talking about is presenting our ideas and allowing other people to present their ideas to us and give us evidence that runs counter to our beliefs and truly take it and consider it. Restate it. Let them know that you understand what it means, and then look at the evidence against yours. I was trying to remember where the study was done, but I was reading that some research scientists did a study and they put people in a room and they made sure that these people had two separate sets of belief systems. And they gave them 5 minutes to list all of the arguments for or against their position. And what they found was, without a doubt, that people listed more items on the side of the belief system that they held. But when the researchers came back into the room and probed and asked them questions about the other side, they were each able to come up with 5 to 7 additional things on the other side that they knew they had stored in their brain, but the cognitive bias did not permit them, right, to write down an equal number of pros as they did cons for the idea that challenged theirs. And I think this is something that we all do in our mind, right? We choose to consider things, but we consider it in the light of the facts that are most favorable to our position. That's called confirmation bias, right? And confirmation bias really is closed mindedness in another shirt, right? It's like it got out of its suit and went on and put a Hawaiian shirt. Ways to overcome that and ways to cultivate an open mind is to be aware of our biases. Look for ways to challenge the information that we're taking in, and don't cherry pick the information that is comfortable for you. Read the news, but don't accept everything from a source that you're comfortable with. And I'm not going to get into the news, guys, because I understand that at this point, um, media is cherry picking what's presented, and there are problems on both sides. I said it, I meant it. So there are ways to get unbiased news sources. It's important to examine all positions. So I'm taking this offline for news, but what I'm really saying is we shouldn't be cherry picking information about the things that we truly hold as belief systems as well. We need to take in all of the information. There's a scripture that I love that in the Bible it says, study to show yourself approved, a workman who need not be ashamed, rightly divining the word of truth. It is so important to take in information that challenges what we believe so that we can test it against what we do know. It challenges us to know our position better, to understand our position better, and to refine our position when it's necessary. And many times it is. The smartest people are the ones who are willing to change their mind. So, ways to become more open minded: one, ask questions. Two, give yourself and the other person time. Do not rush the conversations or the back and forth. Take your time, examine it, practice humility. Practice humility. What this really means is when we're asking these questions and engaging in these conversations, people know when you're doing it so that you can get a chance to give your side of the story. People know when you're doing it just to say you asked the question and you're listening to prepare your response, not to understand. Practice humility. When we think we're an authority and we know everything that there is to know on something, it comes across. And so we have to be willing to say, there are things that I don't understand here that I can learn. Because if you don't do that, your mind will create a screen and no information will be able to get through. And a lot of times this creates a bias that scientists and researchers have shown. People think they're smarter than they are because they are just unwilling to take in information that challenges what they think they know. And so true experts are very humble about their knowledge. They know that there's typically a chance, especially scientists, that their theory will be disproven or that someone will refine it in a way that makes their research look like, you know, hieroglyphics. And everyone we meet, if we could believe this and receive it, our lives and our relationships would be so much better. Everyone we will ever meet knows something that we don't know. And if we could take that, chew it, put it on a t-shirt, put it on a coffee mug, write it down on our little post-it note and put it on our monitor, it would help us to engage with others in a way that exhibits humility. So, open-mindedness is not just important in individual relationships, it's important in leadership because you will not grow if you do not learn to listen to others and You'll have to go back to the beginning if you missed what we really mean when we're talking about listening, but you will not grow in leadership if you cannot learn to listen to others. Two, being open minded is incredibly important as a parent. Because if we do not listen to our children to understand them, we will create a version of our children that exists only in our mind and does not reflect who they are. And when they leave our home, we will not even know who's out there. We won't know what they're going to do. We can think, right? Oh, I raised my child, right? Did you? Because did they understand why they were doing what they were doing? Did you understand why they disagreed with what you wanted them to do? Do you know how they will respond and react given any given set of circumstances? And if the answer to that is no, it's probably because you didn't do enough listening. It's probably because you were unable to humble yourself and understand that even children have a worldview. Even children have a lived experience that can teach us something. And if you need a reminder, my son has set my watch to a Minnie Mouse, like, let's see if I can show it. No, it keeps going off to a Minnie Mouse like screen, and I can't get it off. Okay. He's 10. Okay. And he knows how to use my technology better than I do. Ask questions, challenge your belief systems, give yourself time, listen to understand. And don't believe that just because you know something, you know everything there is to know about something. Guys, I hope this has been helpful to you. We're going into another election season. It's about to be chaos on chaos, and I'm trying to save some relationships. There are questions that shouldn't be asked if you already know the answer and you don't want to hear it. But there are ways to have conversations in which we can all come out learning a little something new that we never knew before, and maybe challenging the way that we have believed about someone's thought processes, belief systems, biases, or even their actions as a result of what we believe about them. So I want to encourage you to challenge yourself on open-mindedness. Try to find an opportunity to challenge one belief system that you've held. Doesn't matter with whom, it doesn't matter when. Try to find a way to challenge one belief system that you've held. Really challenge it. Challenge it with someone that you know does not believe as you do. Take the time to listen. Take the time to be humble. Take the time to ask questions and then give it time. Think about it. List all of the reasons why you believe as you believe and why they believe as they believe, and see if anything in your perspective changes. Sometimes it won't, but sometimes it will. And it's always good to get a new perspective. I want to encourage you to be open. You can learn so much and you can grow so much. Because remember, if you're not growing, you're dying. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you next week for Wisdom Wednesday. Remember, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. Choose wisely. Good night.